From the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina, this is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, presented by a cloud guru, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. You know, one of the things that we've been trying to do more and more this year, just based on a lot of feedback from people, is, you know, let's dig in deeper to what's going on in the public cloud. Let's kind of get to know, what's going on in the services. How can they be taken advantage of for people's businesses, but really just kind of get an understanding of what goes on in the public cloud, because I think so many of our listeners for a long time have been, running services in their own data centers on-prem. And as you start using more managed services or things on demand out of the cloud, you kind of want to know what's going on behind the scenes. What do those services deliver, and kind of, do some comparisons for what you know and maybe what you want to learn about. So today we're very, very lucky. We've got Dominic Preuss, who is Director of Product Management and focuses very much on databases and storage from the Google Cloud Platform. So Dominic, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, first off, thank you for being on. Glad to have you on. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about your background, both about what you focus on in Google, but also some of the interesting things that you've done in your past, because it's a pretty broad set of domains and both business side and technical side things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of different opportunities in my career. So when I originally came out of school, I actually went to Duke University, so go Duke, and originally came out as a software developer. So I was working on consulting engagements for large enterprises to deliver enterprise software. So this was in the late 90s. I then transitioned into technical pre-sales. So I was working on the sales side of these long, 18 to 24-month sales cycles, selling large solutions to companies like Nokia and Alcatel and NCR, National Cash Register. And then after I did that for a while, I actually came back and I joined Google for the first time in 2004, where I was actually a strategic technology evangelist. That was my title. It's still the best title I've ever had. And I worked with a number of the large advertisers for Google around Google to understand Google technology. So they were large AdWords customers, but I was really helping them understand what was great about Google and why they should partner with Google. So then I ended up getting involved in the AdWords side. So I was part of the original AdWords product management team in 2004 to 2007, and then ended up leaving Google. So I was in New York City, and I wanted to test out the New York startup scene. So I was at a company called Meetup.com for a while. I was at a joint venture between Dow Jones and IAC. And then most recently, I was the CTO at a company called Second Market, which was very involved in the pre-IPO Facebook lead up to their IPO. So we worked with a lot of Facebook employees and investors then. And then I came back to Google about 3.5 years ago and joined the Google Cloud Platform team, where I started working on all of our databases. So I've been looking after our various database and storage products for the last 3.5 years.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I may want to poke kind of poke at some of those past things, but we'll do that off show, maybe sort of offline. Listen, both Aaron and I, had a chance to attend Google Cloud Next last year. We may get out there this year as well. More and more announcements are coming from Google in terms of partnerships and services, and people are starting to break out kind of revenue numbers. So getting a better feel for what the business is evolving to. Like, what's the general kind of sentiment amongst the Google Cloud team and amongst Google Cloud customers these days? What's the services are evolving, but what's the general sentiment you're hearing from the marketplace about GCP these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have spent a lot of time recruiting. We're kind of aggressively growing the team in leaps and bounds, and kind of I talk about this as kind of a twice in a lifetime opportunity. As I said earlier, I was on the AdWords team back in 2004, and we saw that 70% of media consumption was online, but only 10% of advertising spend was. So we knew a really large portion of the $700 billion of U.S. advertising spend at the time was going to move online. Fast forward to 2016, and we're seeing a very similar thing with cloud. the public cloud market is about a $200 billion business according to Gartner. Global IT spend is about $3.3 trillion. So we're seeing less than 10% of IT spend is moved to the public cloud. And so, to use an American sports analogy, we really think it's kind of the first half of it's the first inning of it's the top of the first inning,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
Very early in the game. And I think the thing that's been really exciting for me to see over the last 3.5 years is we really hit the inflection point, I would say in the last 12 months. So when I first got here, people were saying, oh, the cloud isn't as secure as on-premise, and, maybe I'll get to the cloud someday. And now, we've really seen the inflection point where people are saying, oh, the cloud is actually more secure than what I'm doing on-premise. And not only do I want to do something in the cloud, I need to do everything in the cloud. And so we really think we've hit that inflection point where we've seen that acceleration of customers coming onto the public clouds, and we absolutely see that in our business, but we see that in the industry more broadly.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like kind of the comparison between the ad space a decade ago and where we are in terms of cloud adoption and maturity. So I appreciate that. For folks that maybe haven't dug into the database space in GCP specifically, give me like the high level way that you explain to people kind of the set of database services that you offer, because it's fairly broad, it's fairly robust, but how do you kind of explain it to people?
Sure. So our approach to the platform, so obviously we have all the core building blocks that you would need to host an application. So a VM, block storage, networking, all of those things. And the way that we look at our managed services is really we want to provide a use case, a solution for every use case. So we have, if you need managed MySQL or Postgres, we have Cloud SQL. If you need a managed database, document database, we've got Cloud Data Store. If you need a scale-out relational database, we have Cloud Spanner. If you need a wide column store, we have Cloud Bigtable. And if you need a data warehouse, then we've got BigQuery. And so it might not be the solution for every customer, but we want to make sure that we have a managed offering for every workload. And then we'll work with the partner ecosystem to provide any other solutions that aren't met by those. And so that's really our goal, is to make sure that you can run a fully managed stack with zero ops, right? So very few operational people. Let Google manage that for you if that's how you want to run your business. And so it's really about making sure that we have, a solution for each of those workloads. And now we're really innovating and kind of pushing each of those solutions forward. Gotcha.
Makes sense. And especially these days, I mean, there's so many different use cases. Having kind of the breadth of databases, not forcing people to kind of, use a certain database that maybe isn't optimized for a use case is really important. Are you seeing, as you talk to companies, are you seeing more demand for people to try and migrate, bring existing applications and data sets into the cloud, or is it is the bigger demand about new databases, new use cases, new applications, or do you have a sense yet of where the bigger piece of demand is?
Absolutely. So we brought in Diane Green about 1.5 years ago. We acquired a company called Bebop, and we really consolidated all of our sales and marketing around the enterprise. And so we've been very focused on traditional enterprise over the last, 2.5 years. And so the majority of workloads that we're seeing are traditional lift and shift. So what we see is customers are taking their traditional stack. So whatever their application is, whatever software it's using, they're taking it from on-premise and they're moving it into the cloud as is. So they're basically de-risking the migration and going from a CapEx model to an OpEx model first by moving everything into the cloud. Once they've done that migration, then they're looking to re-platform on top of the managed services. So basically get the application moved into the cloud so you start to realize some of the gains, and then over time re-platform onto more managed services to lower your operational load and start to basically lower your total cost of ownership by moving on to those managed services.
I gotcha. So is it common for, let me kind of maybe translate it, is it common for people to say, okay, let's say I've got a SQL database today that backs one of my applications. I bring that to the Google Cloud. Maybe initially it's running on just VMs because that's what it looked like in my data center, and then over time you move that SQL database to a managed SQL database, managed service of some sort. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yep, that's a very common pattern.
Okay.
There's take that workload, move it over. It's a very common pattern. The other common pattern that we see is that people will start by taking their non-mission critical workloads. So let's say their data and analytics pipelines, move those over, get comfortable with the cloud, and then bring over their mission critical workloads. Or they'll use the cloud as a DR site, a disaster recovery site, to really get comfortable with running in the cloud. And then once they get comfortable with the availability and the controls that they have in the cloud, then they'll move their primary over into the cloud. So we see a lot of that as ways of people trying to de-risk their migrations by doing it piecemeal or starting with their less mission critical and then over time moving their mission critical applications.
Yeah. Well, what do you typically find as people are going through those transitions? So they've got some stuff that still runs on-prem, some is running in the cloud. Like what are the most common still pain points that they have, or just sort of big transition things they have to get through in order to be more successful than they were before?
Yeah, I think it's while it does happen. So we have Evernote as a customer, and they basically moved from on-premise into the cloud, and I think it was like 80 some days, and that was kind of an all-in. That's very unusual, right? Generally, what we see customers moving pieces of applications from on-premise into the cloud, and then they basically are inherently in a hybrid scenario. So then the question becomes, how do we get network connectivity? How do we have secure connectivity between their on-premise and the cloud? As initially 10% is in the cloud, and then 30, and then 40, and then eventually 90 or even 100%. But we definitely see customers that end up in that hybrid scenario, and so there's a lot of work that we're doing around private interconnect, so have you a private circuit between your network on-premise and the cloud, things like VPN connections, partner interconnect. So a lot of challenges are really around connectivity between on-premise and the cloud, and that often comes down to networking. Yeah, makes sense. And Google has always sort of highlighted the fact that bigger, faster network, more entry points and so forth. So definitely something that I think people will, if they haven't sort of realized it as an advantage, has always been something that Google has had a ton of background in terms of just big, fast networks all over the place and so forth. Yeah, the advantage of running YouTube, which takes up a significant portion of all the bandwidth on the internet, is that we have really good networking. Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned that kind of the goal eventually is to get to, less and less ops, letting Google manage that. What do you see or hear as the transition for people that typically would identify as being like a DBA? What's a DBA's role in the transition? And then, do they continue to serve a function, or does that become more of sort of an application development team's role, or how are DBAs adjusting to cloud databases, if you will?
Yeah, I think that the as we start to offload the pieces of their job that is the lowest value add, right? So, doing backups and doing, basic maintenance or doing upgrades of the binary, like as we are kind of taking that away from them, it really allows them to focus on the part of the job that's the highest value, right? So things like schema design and optimizing queries, and, every database still has a lot of optimizations that have to happen at the data plane level, right? So what's the right schema? What are the right queries? What are the right indexes? All of those still all of those remain incredibly important, and really move the DBA towards their higher value add portion of their job, and away from things that are more mundane, like backups and the updating the database and things like that. So what we have seen is that it really allows the DBAs to focus on the part of the job that they enjoy, that actually provides the most value back to the organization.
Gotcha. Makes sense. One of the things that, as sort of an outsider, looking at either Google or Google Cloud, there's always a perception that Google has, a ton of background and experience in kind of big data types of things, analytics and so forth. The ad business obviously, drives a ton of expertise in that. What is, how does Google translate that kind of internal expertise around big data into stuff that customers can take advantage of in some of the database services? Because obviously, hiring data scientists is hard, finding them is hard. Like, how do you translate your internal expertise into stuff that becomes useful for a really broad set of customers?
I'll give you two different kind of answers to that. So the first one is that internally, we don't have data silos. So all the data is integrated and designed to be federated. And so one of the things that people get to take the advantage of is that we have the ability to basically break down the silos of your data. So the idea is that when you bring your data into cloud, whether it be into Bigtable or GCS or to BigQuery, you need to be able to query it. And so we offer things like federated queries in BigQuery, which basically allows you to do queries against your data in either Bigtable or GCS or Google Drive or in BigQuery storage. And that really is a manifestation of how Google runs it internally. So that came out of an internal project called Dremel. And really the idea is that it's a federated query engine. And so customers don't have to worry as much about where they're going to drop their data, because we make sure that either through federated queries or Dataflow or Dataproc, we make it very easy to correlate your data, move it, clean it up, do that. And that all comes from Google's kind of history of deriving the majority of our value as a company out of data, right? We're basically in the data business and driving value out of data, and that's what we do. And so you see that manifest in those tools. The second thing I'll say is that we're really starting to bring to bear some of our expertise in machine learning and really making it easier for customers to run their workloads. So we're announcing a number of things that will make it really easy and almost transparent to the customers that they're taking advantage of Google's machine learning expertise, whether that be on recommendations for how to use the platform or baking some of these functions into some of our products. You'll really start to see us baking kind of the machine learning TensorFlow expertise that we've always had and make it kind of an inherent part of the platform so that customers will get the value of it without having to do anything. And that's another area where we can really bring that data and machine learning background and history at Google to the advantage of our Google Cloud Platform customers. Okay.
So if I'm a customer who, starts consuming one of the Google Cloud services, whether it's storage or database, is it in essence, is there sort of like a button or a checkbox that somewhere you say like, yes, also make this part of a federated sort of data lake, if you will, or how, like, what's the mechanics of saying, hey, we started with this service or that service where our data went, and then it eventually becomes kind of federated?
Sure. So two examples of this are I've just been writing a ton of data into Bigtable. I've got a couple terabytes or a petabyte of data sitting in Bigtable. You know what? I really want to run a SQL query against that. Let me go into BigQuery. Let me define that as an external table. Let me define a schema. And now I can run queries from Bigtable and even join against data in BigQuery storage against that data. And so it's a thing that you can do after the fact. After you have all the data in there, you can basically tell BigQuery how to look at that data and how to access it, and then you can do so. Same thing for Google Cloud Storage. Let's say that you're writing, millions or billions or trillions of Avro files into a GCS bucket, and now you want to start to do some aggregations across that using BigQuery. You go to BigQuery, you tell it where the data is, you tell it what the schema is for the Avro files, and now you can start to run distributed queries across all of that data in a GCS bucket. And so it's really, after the fact, after the data has already been there, you're like, oh, I actually want a new way of accessing that data and driving value from it. You can do it after the fact. Gotcha.
And if people wanted to sort of dig into, you said the project that kind of put that together was called Dremel?
Yeah, so the internal history was Dremel. I believe there's some white papers about it, but that is what BigQuery is based on, our external product. And so BigQuery is the Google Cloud product that enables all of this, but it comes off of a history of Dremel. Okay, makes sense. We'll dig into that for folks and try and get some things in the show notes for you as well. Cool. We've seen this thing lately where some of the some different companies are so serverless is becoming this big industry buzzword. And for a little while, serverless was always sort of associated with, application modeling, right? We're going to break applications down into functions, and it was sort of functions as a service. But maybe over the last 6 months, 9 months or something, we're starting to hear some of the cloud providers talk about the kind of the back end, the operations of some of their services as serverless. So a database service is serverless because you don't have to think about what's kind of behind the scenes. Can you give us a sense, like, are you seeing that with customers who are saying like, I just don't want to think about the underlying infrastructure, and I want you to think of it as serverless in terms of, performance or scaling out capacity? I mean, is that something that terminology comes into play for your space? Absolutely. Serverless is a really frustrating term for us we really kind of pioneered this whole serverless space with App Engine, 9 or 10 years ago, where you don't do any upfront provisioning, you push some code and then you start to serve and you only pay for what you consume. Like that is the serverless provisioning model. And so, we feel that we've often been working this way. So, if you wanted to build let's just say you wanted to build a serverless stack on Google Cloud Platform, if you use App Engine, BigQuery, and Google Cloud Storage and PubSub, right? Those are all non-provisioned, pay-per-consumption, no upfront work that you could use to basically build an application that has no upfront provisioning, right? And so the way that we think about serverless is you don't have to pre-provision, you don't have to worry about scaling up or scaling down. You only pay for what you use, either on a per-ops basis or on a consumption basis. And we have we can build an entire end-to-end application that most people would call serverless, and it isn't event-driven. It's not, Google Cloud Functions. It's really the provisioning model. And so we really talked about that as kind of a zero-ops model. So we talked about it a lot in the market as kind of the no DevOps model, right? The favorite quote is always Snap, where they say, well, do you have a DevOps organization? He's like, yeah, totally. It's huge. Like, well, how many people is it? He's like, I don't know. They all work on Google Cloud Platform.
Gotcha.
Right? Like he basically outsourced his entire DevOps organization to Google, and they got to, a multi-billion-dollar business without hiring any DevOps people. And so we think that, we actually have an incredibly strong serverless offering. And now you're just really into semantics about how people are using the word. And, is it event-driven? Is it no provisioning? I think that's it's unfortunate the word has become so overloaded because it's kind of lost some of its value. Gotcha.
So for companies that buy database software, in the enterprise, on-prem stuff, there's just reams and reams of examples of people that are like, buying database software is painful. Our database software vendors, take advantage of us. We have this thing once a year where they come in and audit us, and we get a big bill. And Google Cloud has had this kind of evolution of how pricing works. At least I know for like compute and so forth, where it's like the more you use the platform, the more discounts sort of kick in and so forth. And does that same sort of pricing approach work in the database space? Do you sort of, the more you're using it, the more discounts kick in? And how do people adapt to having known a certain pricing model before to, kind of cloud pricing models?
Yeah. It is one of the main reasons that we see customers moving, right, is that the upfront decision that people used to have to make of saying, I'm going to make a 3-year commit to me, and I'm going to guess that at the end of the 3 years, I'm going to have exactly this many developers or this many servers or this many things. And it was really painful, and it took up a ton of time. And had very little value. And it was always wrong. And so, what's great about the cloud model is that we can we can basically say, look, don't worry about making any decisions up front. Just start to use it, and we'll charge you for what you use. And it really removes the risk and the pain of making those decisions. And so, in areas where we can say, oh, well, if you've got higher utilization, then we have, we obtain operational efficiencies, therefore we'll pass that discount on to you. That's absolutely the model that Google wants to move and continue to move down with all of our services. And so, any situation where we can create a financial incentive for customers to do things that make it easier for us to operate the service, we'll continue to create incentives to do that. And so it's definitely a core pricing principle of the platform. Databases are a little bit different because, you still have to store the data. It's not like the data doesn't go away when it's not being used. Like I still have to maintain all of it and keep it consistent and do backups and all those other things. So the database model doesn't lend itself as well to those sustained use discounts that we provide on Google Compute Engine. But it is a fundamental principle that we try to apply to all of our products where we see the opportunity to create that incentive.
Gotcha. No, it makes sense. And again, it's, we're always just trying to kind of educate people on like, what are the basic differences when you go from something that you've known for 10, 15, 20 years to sort of these new models. So, kind of appreciate you giving us the basics there. Let me ask you one last question before I let you go. Let's say you're sitting down with a new customer. They're trying to understand the cloud. They're trying to understand, kind of how they're going through, say, a digital transformation, if you will. Like, what are the 1 or 2 tips that you give them that you say, look, this is these are the immediate things that cloud databases are going to do for you that are going to, you can just immediately point to and say, these will make your business better. These will either make you more profitable. It'll save you costs on the ops side. Like what are some of those immediate things that you typically point out to people?
Just as it pertains to databases, the first thing I always point out is that Google and all the public cloud vendors, for that matter, are really good at running databases. And so, when you have a business or a mission critical application running on a database, you want to know that the people running it are really good at their job. And so it is a clear message that I believe to customers is that if you really need this thing to be up and be available and you want to bet your business on it, then you want the experts to be managing it. And it's really hard and really expensive to hire those experts into your enterprise. But there's, a number of us in the space now that are managing tens of thousands of databases and with really high availability that you can build your businesses on. And so I really point to people that say, hey, do you really want to carry the pager, when there's an outage at 3:00 in the morning on a Saturday? Or, do you want to outsource that to somebody that does this for a living? And that's a point that, I think really resonates with people, especially any of us that have carried the pager, that's really attractive to have somebody like Google's site reliability engineering team behind you to kind of support those. The second one I would say is also around the business model. The one that you brought up before around licensing, I find it just absolutely fascinating how many companies are building solutions with software from vendors that they are adversarial with. Like the vendor customer relationship in some of these has become so inverted where there really is an adversarial relationship between a company and their software vendors. And I really believe that that's an untenable position. And so customers need to be really careful not to get themselves into a situation where incentives aren't aligned and it's hard to go in a different direction, right? It's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to use this database technology and then get 6 months into the project and be like, oh, I totally picked the wrong one, right? Like I missed these set of requirements that I didn't know I had, and now I need a different technology. And if you've done a 3-year upfront commitment to some software, like that's a really painful pivot to make on the business. And so by consuming products on a per consumption basis and on a no risk basis, it really just gives you a lot more operational flexibility to do what's right for your business. Those are kind of the two things that I always bring up with people is really the availability and security. I guess the third thing I would say is security. I think that this is no longer a contentious statement to say that data stored in Google Cloud Platform or any of the public cloud vendors is more secure than what people are doing on premise. And so it really is a security plus. If you've watched any of the videos that Google puts out around our data center security and all of the crazy things that we do to protect customers' data, whether it be 3 levels of encryption at least 3 levels of encryption for any piece of data, physical intrusion detection, all of the things that we do around our data centers, I think that people very quickly get comfortable that it is a more secure place to store their customers' data. And so those would be the 3 things that I would point out to customers that should really drive their buying decision.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. And it's good insight. I think the way the world's changing, the pace that things are changing, having those types of flexibilities, but also knowing that you're working with people that, like you said, have done this tens of thousands of times and do it all the time is really, really important. One last thing, and this is sort of breaking news. I'm just looking through some feeds. Today Google Cloud announced availability of their open service broker. I assume that's going to have some of the things built into it that will be able to allow people to go attach to the various Google Cloud storage and database services, at least whether it's now or over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of these things, we're deeply integrated and supportive of a number of various industry standards, whether it be the OpenStack, Kubernetes, any of the various Linux Foundation. And so we're always looking to make sure that we can plug into whatever industry standards are out there and whatever ways we can to make it easier for customers to access our services, either in on-premise and in the cloud or across public clouds. We want to make sure that we have the most open, lowest lock-in platform for customers, because we believe that that really de-risks the upfront decision if you know that you can, easily get integrated with other ones or again change direction later on. And so with any of these things, we're always working to make sure that we're integrated and compatible with any of the broader initiatives around interoperability.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up with that. Dominic Preuss, thank you so much for the time today. If folks want to, reach out to you, reach out to the database team, the Google Cloud team, what are some of the best ways to do that?
So obviously any of the folks that have Google Cloud Platform accounts will have a way of reaching out to support. Support's the easiest way. They know where to find me. I'm a very short call away from their support rep. Same thing if you have a Google Cloud sales rep, they have a direct line to me and often call me on my cell phone. And so those are the best ways. We do monitor Stack Overflow and Twitter accounts as well. And so we're always watching the social media channels as well. I personally am on Stack Overflow once a day, just looking at issues that people have with the products. And so those are really good channels for people to reach out to us. Very cool.
Very cool. Well, listen, with that, folks, we're going to wrap it up. For Dominic and for Aaron, thank you so much for listening today, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more podcasts, show notes, and everything social media. And visit acloud.guru for all your cloud training needs.